Akshara Junior College for IIT, JEE and NEET Academy, Mahabubnagar. Myself M. Shweta, Senior Zoology Faculty. Today I am going to start a topic, the living world. You know your living world is having diversified organisms. Many living organisms living on the planet along with plants and animals. How do they survive and what is meant by life? Let's discuss what is life. After completing our topic, we'll just know how to solve these questions. So what is life? Life is a unique combination of a complex molecules. Atoms all combine to form molecules. Molecules all combine to form compounds, and these compounds in turn develop into unicellular forms. So the unicellular forms are the only organisms which are evolved on the planet for the first time. A single cell started its life on the planet and slowly had developed into a living organism. Let's know what is a living organism. Living organisms are self-replicating, self-cautious and self-evolving characters which do not survive individually. Any living organism usually live in a group. A single living organism will not survive. So all living organisms have replicating character, self-evolving character, and even though they respond to the external stimuli. Let's see what are the properties of living organisms. The properties of living organisms. You might have known that every living organism generally has the following characters like growth, reproduction, metabolism, cellular organization and cautiousness. So every living organism do show these properties. Now you might have got a doubt that does all living things will show these characters? Do non-living things does not show the character? Let's discuss at the end of our topic. All the living have the characters or non-living also having these characters. One by one we'll go into the depth. First one, growth. Growth is a property of increase in the cell number. They'll increase cell number gradually and divide, produce into new individual organisms. Cells usually divide and produce new cells, and the divided cells are exactly to their parent form. Growth is a limited character in animals. If you take animal as an example, in animals, growth is limited to certain extent. You cannot find any animal growing immortally. Animal will gradually increase in its size, and after attaining to a limited age, like at a particular age, organism do not grow morphologically or physically. Instead, the growth is confined to only cells. Cellular growth is seen in animals, whereas in plants, if you see, plants usually grow ultimately eternal growth. Growth is eternal in plants. In plants, the growth continuously present. If you take a branch, if you break a leaf, or if you just cut any part of a plant body, it will grow again. It means that growth is eternal in plants. It's not same in animals. In animals, the growth is confined to little period, a particular period. After becoming adult, only the mitotic cells, the somatic cells in our body will show growth, but not all the cells. Now see, does all the animals, like all living forms, show growth? Every form on the planet show growth? If it comes to mountain, take a non-living material. As we generally discuss that growth is a life character of every living organism. But take a non-living material here, a mountain. Mountain usually show growth. So listening that you might have got a doubt, how does it show growth? Of course the mountains are non-living material. materials, but they also grow, but the growth is not due to cellular division. They grow by increasing or deposition of content outside their object. Materials get deposited on the top of these substances so that they start growing, like they look like growing. The growth in non-living materials is not from inside. Instead, the growth in non-living material is growth from outside. It's an important one. Now, growth is not, we can make a statement here, growth is not the character of all living things, and it is also a character of non-living things also. Let's take another property of living organism. The second one is reproduction. Reproduction is of two types. You know, every living organism will reproduce in order to increase its number, and there are basic two types of reproductions are there. One is asexual reproduction and other one sexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction you can see in amoeba, unicellular forms, as just now we have seen. Several unicellular forms usually reproduce asexually, which is an asexual mode of reproduction. Coming to sexual mode of reproduction. In sexual mode of reproduction, organisms usually involve in a fusion of gametes. Gametes fuse to form a zygote. The zygote gradually divide and produce a adult organism. And organisms which are produced by sexual reproduction are exactly same as their parents. A little bit features, characters will be changed, but they look similar. The similar individuals are produced, which we call them as species. Whereas reproduction asexually. In asexual reproduction, organisms divide and produce exact copies of their parent. They do not morphologically or structurally do not show any type of changes. Asexually and sexually they reproduce. All living forms will reproduce and increase their number. But make a question here. Does all living forms all will reproduce? If you take that question, the answer will be no. Not all living forms reproduce. Answers are examples. If you take honeybee and mules. Are they living forms? Yes. Being as a living animals here, the mules and honeybees are sterile. They do not reproduce. Mules are produced by. Mules are the organisms which are produced by crossing between two different species. Two different species crossed and produced mules. Now, objective important point is mules are produced by crossing of a male donkey with a female horse. Mules are produced by crossing of male donkey and a female horse. These are sterile. Now take a honeybee. Honeybees, in that you have three different forms of honeybees. A queen honeybee and male honeybee and a worker honeybee. All worker honeybees are sterile. Being as a living organism, the worker honeybees, and they are all female, but they do not reproduce. But whereas males are again fertile and female queen is also fertile. Only the female honeybees, which are working female honeybees, are sterile individuals. So the reproduction is also not a property of all living organisms. It is confined to only some individuals. Now take another character of living organism, that is metabolism. Now what is metabolism? The sum total of both anabolic and catabolic reactions which take place in a living system, in a living body, is called metabolism. Now how do you gain energy? In your body, you need energy by two mechanisms. One is anabolism, which you take food and convert that food into ATP, which is an anabolic process. And this ATP is consumed for your work, for your contraction and for your movement, which is a catabolic process. During catabolism, you utilize this ATP molecule. During anabolism, you prepare ATP molecule. The sum total of these two combinations, these two reactions, anabolic and catabolic reactions, together combined to form a reaction called metabolism. So, in the metabolic reactions are only seen in living organisms. Whereas, you might have got a doubt, why can't we see these metabolic reactions in vitro condition, like laboratory condition? In lab, even though in lab you can see the metabolic reactions by converting a starch into glucose, that is also a catabolic reaction where glucose is further converted to carbon dioxide and other substances, which is also a catabolic reaction. You are converting some sucrose to fructose, which is anabolic reaction. So on and so forth, some anabolic and catabolic reactions can be done in lab. So whereas these are not called as metabolic reactions, these are all called as living reactions. The reactions which take place inside the laboratory are called as living reactions but not metabolic reactions. Let's take next character, Cauiousness. All living organisms do have Cauiousness and cellular organization character. Now what is cellular organization here? You know, our life on the planet started as a single cellular organism, a single cell bacteria usually found on the planet, which is a cyanobacteria. Important, cyanobacteria is a unicellular organism which is found on the planet for the first time, and this single cellular organism developed into multicellular organisms such as archaebacteria and protozoa. Several protozoan organisms developed and evolved into higher order organisms such as fungi, plantae and animals. So all this is cellular level of organization. A single individual cell is not present on the planet. The cells all combine to form compounds, organs and then organ systems, and then so on. It developed into multicellular organisms. Multicellular organisms such as humans and different animals, plants, fungi and so on organisms have been evolved. So it is cellular organization is a defining property of all living system. The last character is Cauiousness. The Cauiousness character, the property of living organisms only have such Cauiousness. No other non-living system have Cauiousness. Imagine that if you just put a rock or a file on a non-living system, on a bench or on a rock, does it show any response? No. Now the same thing, put some water on the living organism, on a dog or on a cat. Does it show any response? Of course. So same is happening here. Cauiousness is seen in living forms. The plants and animals do show responses to some external stimuli. Environmental stimulus is showing some responses in the animals. Now take a plant here. This plant, whenever it is occupied by some other animals, some other insects and so on, then immediately this plant show responses towards that insect and trap it, eat it. You know that is about insectivorous plants. Take the animal. Animal also show responses towards external stimuli, towards environmental stimuli. Now environmental stimulus like a dog is showing response to a light, and any animal show response towards temperature, towards water, towards sunlight and towards external environmental stimulus. And this character is confined only to living system. Human is the most powerful organism on the planet who show a great Cauiousness on this planet. And human is having such a Cauiousness because having of a FOXP2 gene in his brain. Due to the presence of this gene inside their body, they have an ability to show response to external stimuli. All responses are calculated, gathered and occupied and remembered by this human body. And that's the reason why when we touch a fire in our childhood, even after becoming adult, you can identify that fire is dangerous to our body. So this is about different living characters and of living organisms. Let's discuss about different questions based on this topic. So the frequently asked question which has been asked in 2018 and 2020 also, regulation of cells activity takes place through. How do the cells regulate? Regulation of cells activity takes place through. Now here the question is asking you about how do the cells respond and how do they divide and how the regulation of division is confined. The regulation of cells always takes place through regulation of cells activity takes place through flow of energy. Whenever there is an energy flow in a living system, the energy, anabolic and catabolic reactions will follow the cells to continue its division and grow, develop into individual living organism. Next question. One of the first acts in taxonomy is, here taxonomy explains that all animals you cannot study by putting it under one condition. You cannot study all living organisms gathered at one place and study about all these animals at one time. So what does taxonomy talks about? Taxonomy means just classifying the living organisms, putting under one section. So taxonomy explains, the first act in taxonomy is, if you want to classify the living organisms, you need to put under separate classification, separate characterizations. So to know, in order to do that, you need to identify them first. So the answer is, one of the first acts in taxonomy is identification. Identification. Let's go to the next question, which is asked recently. The living organism can be exceptionally distinguished from the non-living things on the basis of their ability for. Here the question is asking you about how do you distinguish a living organism from a non-living organism. The living organisms can be unexceptionally distinguished from the non-living things on the basis of their ability. So you get the question, I think. How do you distinguish a living from a non-living one? So the living will have the basic characters. First one is responsiveness to touch. Every living organism usually will give a response towards a touch. Of course, a bench cannot respond to a touch, or a microphone will not respond to a touch, or even any other non-living materials will not show any response to a touch. Let's see, this according to our knowledge, this might be the right answer. And why not reproduction? Does all living forms do reproduce? Yes, but what about mules and honeybees? They do not reproduce. So this is not a distinguishable character for living and non-living. Even some organisms being as a living forms, they do not reproduce. So the answer is no. Interaction with the environment and progressive evolution. All organisms do evolve. We know that living forms do evolve. And what about non-living things? Take a mountain as an example. Mountain is growing in its structure gradually and increasing its outer external mass. So growth is from outside. This character is also cannot be taken as a distinguishable character. And what about growth and movement? As we just got it, growth and movement. Of course, growth is not a character of both living and non-living. Movement, if you take, they usually non-living also will move towards air environmental conditions, etc. But this cannot be taken as a character for both living and non-living. So that's all for today. Stay tuned to zoology. Thank you. Meet me in